Trying to make Fallout New Vegas into a good looking game really is a Sisyphean task. No matter how hard you try, chances are it will always look a slight bit uncanny, or you'll completely lose the vanilla art style once you've downloaded enough mods. Recently, when going back to the game, I found myself kind of not wanting to use things like SALVO 2, the massive visual overhaul that covers the entire Mojave and capital wasteland with literally one click. But SALVO does have its issues. For starters, if you're not running New Vegas Reloaded, it will just look incredibly flat and dull. And considering the performance impact MVR can have, it's understandable that you might not want to run it. Thankfully though, there's a plethora of vanilla plus visual mods on the Nexus that maintain the original feeling that New Vegas has whilst having the biggest impact on the visuals of the game. So let's start things off small with the vanilla Parallax series of mods. It's worth noting that both of these will require things like shader loader and parallax shaders terrain, as well as parallax shaders objects. By themselves, those mods won't do much, but they'll add support for the fake 3D depth that parallax textures can provide, even without New Vegas Reloaded. Vanilla Terrain Parallax by Scouter is gonna add some of that depth to the vanilla terrain, keeping the original color map but adding depth to all the landscape textures you can find across the game. This includes things like having cracks in the sand actually be indented, and being able to make it look as though the pebbles are full 3D models instead of just a flat texture that, well, they actually are. This does of course come with a performance impact, but honestly with how good you can make New Vegas run by following Wall's performance guide, you'll probably already be hitting your frame rate cap, so this won't likely have much of a noticeable impact on your frames. Similar to Vanilla Terrain Parallax, Vanilla Objects Parallax by Biggie is gonna cover the majority of objects in the game, including improving upon some more noticeable poor assets in the vanilla game. The rubble piles have probably seen the biggest improvement out of everything. These looked terrible in the vanilla game, but with this mod installed they actually, well, look like a pile of rubble. This really should be used in tandem with Vanilla Terrain Parallax, as there's several areas like cliffs where if you're not using this mod as well, you'll be able to notice that the parallaxing isn't really doing its job, because, well, the cliffs aren't actually terrain, they're objects. Both of these mods together go a great way in making New Vegas feel significantly less flat, and as far as Vanilla Plus playthroughs go, there's no reason not to use these, as they just improve the quality of your Mojave without changing the vanilla art style whatsoever. But the biggest factor in changing how New Vegas looks is the weather. It handles the tint and is easily one of the biggest factors in making New Vegas, well, look like New Vegas. But some of you might like that, which is why Sunshine on My Shoulders is the perfect weather mod. Not only because it's a solid Vanilla Plus option, but because it's customizable. Meaning that if there's something you don't particularly like, chances are you can change it. Don't like the tint? Well, you can remove it or make it even stronger. And while you can customize things like desert natural weathers, this mod is all configurable via the mod configuration menu, meaning that your changes will be reflected without you needing to quit the game to tweak an INI. And the options here are basically everything you'd want. You can change things like the tint colors, the intensity of the tint, and even the contrast and saturation. It won't add in any new weather effects, so it just serves as an enhancement for the vanilla ones. And honestly, you can make this look just how you want it to. The only downside to this is that unfortunately it doesn't have a Tale of Two Wastelands patch. Regardless though, for base New Vegas, it's easily the best universal option to recommend for a weather mod, which is probably why it's included in Viva New Vegas now. Even if you do use Viva New Vegas, however, it's going to be worth checking out the mod page, and that is to pick up the Perfect Skies patch. This might stray a bit too far from vanilla for some, but personally my biggest issue with the vanilla weathers that I didn't even really notice until using this mod is the clouds. They look weird, but Perfect Skies completely overhauls the cloud system with a more modern procedural generation technique than even Fallout 4 uses. I don't really know how to describe this other than it just looks really good, and it's the main reason I wanted to make this video. The skies look more realistic and feel more natural than they ever did in the vanilla game. And you can use this with both vanilla weathers and Sunshine on My Shoulders if you pick up the patch, which I highly recommend. For interiors though, we're going to be heading off of the Nexus and onto the Knockout forums, because Conan Troutman's Vanilla Plus interior lighting is admittedly a pretty drastic but an incredibly good visual lighting overhaul. Because vanilla interiors are flat, and comparing them to Fallout 3, they honestly feel unfinished. But this mod overhauls the interiors of areas in both the base game and DLC now, adding in extra effects and a different colour palette that vastly improves the majority of areas it touches. Areas like the Nevada Highway Patrol Station and Doc Mitchell's are the earliest examples of how much of a difference this mod makes. The colours overall are more neutral, and some interiors have been modified to include things like windows where they were absent in the vanilla game. And overall, this is probably just my personal favourite New Vegas mod in general. It really goes a great way in improving how the majority of interiors look, and considering just how many you're going to be entering in your playthrough, a nice visual change for them is really appreciated. Whilst we're on the topic of lighting, adding in extra lights to things is something that helps the Mojave feel more dynamic. So Lumen is going to add it to various items throughout the game, ranging from things like terminals and fire pits all the way to your plasma weapons. There's a lot of things in the base game that should glow that don't, and this mod will address that. It's probably worth also picking up though both Lumen Extended and Lumen Skinned Meshes as well. Extended will cover things like signs and the optional lampposts, whereas Skinned Meshes covers stuff like your armors, so now the lenses on the Ranger helmet will actually emit some sort of light. And another mod that does also introduce some new lights but might go a bit overboard when it comes to Vanilla Plus is Window Ambient Light at Night Expanded. The name is pretty self-explanatory. It ESP-lessly adds in lights to several populated buildings at night, so there's less of a discrepancy between the lights when you go in and what's visible from the outside. Without changing anything, these lights are kind of intense, but thankfully in the faux mod there's an option to enable dimmer lights, which will keep the glows but reduce the intensity, which acts as a nice middle ground between the vanilla and what this mod provides without this option ticked. Patches are also available for a range of mods you might have installed, and similarly to the dimmer lights option, these can also be selected in the faux mod. But to counteract all these newly added lights, we need some shadows. Well, kind of. Vanilla Plus AO is going to introduce ambient occlusion into the game without the need of an EMB or New Vegas Reloaded. With this, things like the corner of rooms and bits around objects and other stuff are going to be darker than their surroundings. So although not full shadows, it helps convey the sense of depth in the world that New Vegas is notoriously missing. And this mod is probably the best way to do it if you don't want to use MVR. It comes with an INI that you can tweak to your liking, with there even being really useful notes basically going over what each setting does. But it does also come with a pre-configured performance preset too if you're worried about your frame rate, although this does obviously come with a slight visual downgrade. The last mod here probably isn't going to be for everyone, but it's been a mainstay in my load order ever since it's released, regardless of what visual setup I'm going for, and that's Blurry Distance. It acts similarly to other mods like Dusty Distance, but instead of completely obscuring the horizon, it adds a really nice soft blur that I find helps smooth out the edges where the sky blends into the horizon. You can adjust various settings in the mod's INI, such as the blur strength and the distance at which the blur will start, but also just, I don't know, I feel as though this makes New Vegas look really clean. I love this mod, so maybe you might too. But yeah, that's basically it. As always though, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, maybe consider liking and subscribing. But I hope you all have a good day, and yeah.